All right, let's get this party started. Welcome, everybody, to our Houston Community College VAST program podcast. Today is November 16th, 2023. Thank you for joining us today. It's another episode of the JAWS Coffee Chat series with Jennifer A. Whitaker. And we also have with us Sue Maraska from VAST program at Houston Community College. We always like to give a special thanks and shout out to some great folks for replaying our shows on their platforms. That would be Marcus Hart of Transform U Media, Zach Clayton of the PAC Channel, Jay Stoyan of the Disability Channel, and Lawrence Wingate of Wingate Studios. We greatly appreciate their support and participation, and I'll try to not trip over my tongue too much more today. But be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our social media pages, our groups, our YouTube channel, or wherever it is you came to find out about us today. So let's get on with this conversation. Welcome, Sue. Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Just so I'm ready when you say that. So, Sue, you and I were just talking about how right now it's our last episode before the Thanksgiving break, and how that is a time when our students at Houston Community College, which is really pretty much any college students, are in need of certain accommodations or adjustments, understandings, and so forth that have to do with the holiday season and its tolls it takes on us, emotional, maybe, like you said, losing family members.
Yes, and I think this is a time of year where not just, individuals with disabilities or students, but I think so many people, the holidays can be very stressful, especially if you lost a family member, for a number of reasons. But I do want to mention that, we're very fortunate at our Houston Community College to have wonderful counseling services. We also have our ADA, most colleges call it ADA or disability services, but where ours is ability services. So when you go to hccs.edu and you go to student services, go to ability services, and you can see all of the accommodations, the counselors, what we provide. But they not only provide accommodations for our students in school, but they can also help connect them to valuable resources in the community. And all of our counselors, not only ability services counselors, but all of our counselors, because there are LPC counselors, there are so many resources now. When I first came to HCC, we didn't have as many resources as we do now in this area. But I noticed that I'm very proud that Houston Community College has so much now. They even have food banks, and they have, for people, they have emergency funding if someone is in need. Maybe someone is about to be homeless or dealing with where they're going to live, financial, whatever the reason is that they're needing assistance or counseling. We have those services, and they're here for any of our college students. Any college student has those counselors that they can go and meet with and share in confidence, in private, what is going on with them. If they're struggling in school, maybe they're struggling in school, maybe there's something going on in their personal life and it's affecting them at school. And so talking to that counselor, maybe there is a way that they can also talk to the instructor, the professor, and see if there's something that can be done in the way of an accommodation or extra time for something, if depending on what the situation is. But I mean, a lot of times it's connecting the students to the different resources out there. Or if someone is in crisis, connecting them to crisis suicide hotline or something like that, crisis hotlines, but connecting them to get those. We want their needs to be met. So whatever needs they're not meeting, we have counselors that know all of these resources. And many of them are actually listed on our website, so that students can do that. But I also know around the holidays, a lot of our student organizations will do food drives, and they will, it seems like there's more of that going on when it gets close to the holidays. So there's the food need, financial, scholarship, and connecting them to those different mental health, if it's mental health resources that they need or counseling. So I think when you're a student with a disability, you can go to any counselor, but our ADA ability services counselors will probably be able to do even more, because they can assist them if there's any additional accommodations that they may need, depending on their situation, so that it doesn't affect their school, their grade or their, and I think that also the counselors do workshops. They do workshops on how to manage stress. It's actually important for our employees too. We have the employee assistance program for any employee, so that if you are feeling the need for a counselor or a therapist, or maybe even meeting with an attorney for something, but wellness, overall wellness, health and wellness, mental health, I think that's what I'm very proud of our college, because we have that employee assistance program for employees, but we also have for students the counseling services, student support services, counseling, and ability services. If you have a disability, they have all of those connections to all of those resources, and they put on a lot of really good workshops to help students. That's where I'm at there with that. But I don't know what we want to talk about with beyond that, but I can definitely probably put something in the chat of how to get there. But if you just go to hccs.edu and you type in counseling, and then it will have, or ability services, it will have the list and the links of all the different resources. But in order to get an accommodation, though, you do have to self-identify. You do have to be able to go and register with ability services before school even starts. But if you didn't, let's say a student didn't do that, though, and they're halfway through the semester and they're realizing they need an accommodation, then they can still go and try to get that. But it's better if you go before school starts, so that you can get that accommodation letter. And then your instructor doesn't know what your disability is. They just get the letter that says they need the specific accommodation. But you can tell your professor, what your disability is if you want to.
I was going to say, what would you say about those people who don't necessarily even know about accommodations? Because I personally, when I went to college, I was already in special needs in K-12 because my parents knew what to do, or at least they had the ambition to speak up and say, hey, Jen has these conditions. What can you do to make it easier and better for her to be able to perform well in school? So how many people later in life realize they have conditions, but maybe, they're that part of the community that comes from families that don't have the education we do. So if they don't have that, they might understand that there are ways that they can go to college and get accommodations, versus to believe that their disability is the reason they can't even go to college, much less get a job.
Yes, and I'm glad you asked that, because there are students that don't always know. So when we're going out to the high schools and we're speaking to the students in high school, we try to make sure they understand that before when you come to the college, you need to register with the ability services, and you have to provide documentation of your disability. Though you don't automatically get an accommodation letter. You have to show what your disability is, and once they see that, they have an intake. The counselors will have an intake with them. Then they can provide the letter and showing what accommodations they would qualify for. But it is up to the student to self-advocate, to go and register for ability services, provide that documentation. They have to actually get the letter to their instructor, either hand give it to them or email it to them. Where the difference in high school, all of that is done for you. But when you're in college, the student has to be more independent and advocate. But there is, once they self-identify, there's so much help and assistance that they can get. Once they do that, if you don't self-identify, then you're going to struggle probably. And, and there's so many services out there, and not just for students with disabilities, but student services, there's so many, and student services in general are out there, resources and services. But when you have a disability, then we want you to have equal access. So we want you to get accommodations if they're needed. Things like extra time, extended time on tests. It may even be taking a test privately, outside of the classroom. It may be, adaptive technology. There's a whole lot of adaptive technology out there now that's available. So there's a lot of resources there for students if they have a disability, but the instructors are not going to, your professors are not going to revise their entire curriculum or something like they would do in high school when they're going into a mainstream class, and then they might have, a special ed teacher with them that's breaking everything down and really, they can do an accommodation, but they're not going to revise or adapt that curriculum. Now, there is such a thing as universal design for learning. And if instructors do certain things that could be good for any student. I remember when I was in college, I was actually getting my master's degree at Houston Baptist University. I think it's called Houston Christian University now, but HBU. And I had a professor that did study guides every time before there was a test. I mean, that right there is a universal design for learning. That's so simple that a professor just did study guides for everybody, or study sessions, or, then those that have certain disabilities, you're not just doing it for the student with a disability, any student, you're doing it for everybody. It's something that will help everyone. But I think that for sure, when the students come to college, they have to know where to go. At our college, it's called Ability Services. But if you punch in ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, it will come up Ability Services. If you go to other colleges, it may be Disability Support Services. They all have different, but usually the word disability or ADA. And all of those counselors, they have counselors at all of the colleges. Now, maybe not every campus, but they have ADA counselors assigned to those campuses. So, for example, you may be at a campus and maybe there's no counselor at that particular campus, but maybe you go as part of Southwest College. So you'll go to Southwest Loop and meet with Dr. Becky Harvey, for example. She's one of the lead counselors at Southwest College. And because it has to be one of those counselors that gives you the accommodation letter. And you do have to register. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, a lot of people don't realize that Houston Community College has an online learning now. And that was actually, it was done originally because of the pandemic. I think you were there with Dr. Barillo when that action was called and we were in the lockdown, but wanted students to still study. But what I like is that Houston Community College kept the online learning. So that has also, in a sense, been an accommodation for students like myself that cannot drive. So they have no way to the college, but they still want to go to college and learn that skill or trade.
Exactly. And, we had online classes before the pandemic, but, when the pandemic hit, everybody went online, and we found out that has grown. Even with our HCC-VAST Academy students, we didn't know anything about online. It was our first time, we had to learn, our faculty had to learn Canvas, and we had to train our students how to do all of that. It was so much learning curve. But when we got ready to come back to the campuses, we had students that wanted to stay online too. And so we created our own VAST online cohort as well. But I know that our online college, we have an online college now. And of course, Dr. Margaret Ford Fisher, who's now our interim chancellor, she was the president, or the first one to be the president of the online college. So there is so much to offer online. Exactly. And I think that does make a difference for people with disabilities. Like you said, it could be transportation. There could be a number of reasons. We had a student that had a seizure disorder and didn't want to be wanted to be on campus, but was afraid of getting those seizures. So wanted to do the online. Now that we have online in VAST, we were able to accommodate that student and said, well, you can do our online. And so he was so happy to do the online since, because of the seizure disorder. So yes.
I was going to say, so I am one that has seizures, and that's why I can't drive. But personally, I found that when I tried to do an on-campus class, as much as I love the social interaction with the students and the engagement of actually listening and watching the
Mhm.
professor in person, that I had different things ranging from seizures to mental health episodes to other things that got in the way of where I couldn't always be at that campus at a certain place at the same time, let's say 6 p.m. every Thursday or something, because different things would get in the way. And with that, the online learning in another way accommodated for me, which was that I have, this date to this date deadline, but I can do it anytime within that window as long as I study and complete whatever materials like the quizzes and reading tests, all that stuff.
And when you're online, it's you can get the accommodations as well, obviously. And you can meet with these counselors virtually, instead of in person. And then I do know that there's laptops or student notebooks that can be checked out at the libraries that are reserved for students with disabilities. And they load them up with a lot of different adaptive software. So everything is fully loaded, whether you need JAWS, someone who's visually impaired might need JAWS or, God, I can't think of all the names of it, but there's so many different technologies, but they'll load them up with all the different technology that you need or software. And you can check those out. And if you need those different text to voice, voice to text, you need different
Yeah, there's one that I use that is
excuse me.
not really an AI or an app, but it reads the text to me. And personally with my health, even though like I have vision, so yeah, I can look and read, but as being a tutor and educator in my own profession, I know that there are students of all ages that don't learn by reading, they learn by hearing. And sometimes when you double that up, where they both hear and follow along with their eyes, they learn it even quicker.
Additional sensory
Yes.
learning.
There is so much, we actually have an adaptive technician. We have two of them at HCC. One of them is housed at our Spring Branch camp. Well, she's actually working from home herself now because she has an accommodation, but her name is Norma Jean, NJ. We call her NJ for short. Norma Jean, I hope she doesn't leave anytime soon with HCC, but she is a mastermind. She knows anything. And I should have her on here one day. You would love, because she knows all the latest adaptive technology software. She knows it all. And she can assess. Do you know her? Did you meet her?
Oh yeah, because when I took
so
my
you know
first
Norma
course,
Jean. Okay.
yeah, when I took my first online course, that was during the pandemic. It was back in 2020, and I took the intro, or what was the first course to web development. That was when you first started, or at least became public about the online learning. I told her, I said, I can't read this book. I said, I have to actually hear somebody say this stuff to me. So my ability office counselor had me send her an email to request a virtual meeting. And she introduced me to, it's called Kersner. It's this something with a K, but it's this
Kurzweil, you mean?
Kurzweil, that's it, Kurzweil. She introduced me to that did exactly what I needed, where I put the icon on, say, a website because I'm using a website for some kind of document as a research, or listening to my electronic book online, something that's still the studies, right? But that's how she accommodated for me. And she said there's a lot of other technology that can do accommodations, but with how well I did with that Kurzweil, I didn't even think there was anything else I needed that was considered a electronic document, or not document, but electronic device or software or something of that nature.
And she did a professional development recently with faculty. She does a lot of those. We invite her to come and speak because we want our instructors and our faculty to know what's available. It's not just the student with a disability getting this and being assessed and checking it out, but faculty just knowing that this exists, it's helpful. But yeah, she's one. We also have John London. John London is at our central campus, and he also has a disability. He is visually impaired and hearing impaired both. He used to run marathons, and he used to, when computers first, the beginnings of computers, before we even had internet and all that, he would take apart and put together computers and rebuild them. When we first met him, he was our very first adaptive technician, and he worked with us in VAST. And then when model programs and services to students with disabilities became ability services, and he ended up working in that area and he became adaptive technician. Then Norma Jean became, so they're both still here. I mean, at our college. So we have both of those. I mean, John London has an adaptive technology lab at Central College. So people with disabilities can go into that lab. And I mean, if you go in there, I mean, the lights are out, it's like dark, and he's got like mood, all of this, because, for people that have sensory and mute, you might even have, you can put headphones on with music or whatever. I mean, everything is in there. It's all, yeah. So he has that adaptive technology lab. But see, whenever you get a student who goes and self-identifies and goes to ADA, talks to the counselor, they will set them up with Norma Jean or John London so that they can assess what technology they may need, what type of adaptive technology they may need. And some of this technology we can provide, HCC can provide. Sometimes if you're connected with TWC, Texas Workforce Commission for VR, they may be able to purchase certain things as well if it's something that the college can't. So they're there also. One thing we don't do though is we don't provide training. So if somebody needs to use JAWS, we're not going to provide the training for that. So sometimes they need to go to the Lighthouse for the Blind or some other program to learn how to use certain software.
Well, what's so interesting is because what you're talking about, where it's not just Norma Jean, but what was the other name?
John London.
John London, that they work with the technology. And personally, with epilepsy, I can only handle, part of what considers me disabled is that I can only handle so many hours or for a very restricted time on electronic device because of the constant flashing of lights that can onset a seizure. And it sounds like they could even have certain things that reduce the flashing or something in the setting that could even make the same computer more so accessible to, say, someone with epilepsy by reducing maybe the frequency of the flashing or block Blu-rays or some other things that would be, not necessarily giving them their special computer, but the same thing they have, just mess into the settings, and then they can study on it.
And Microsoft and Apple, I think, has also implemented more and more now accommodations, and that, years ago in the early years, we didn't have those features. Somebody would have to check out one of those big CCTV or something like that. But now they have so much that you can do on your own, accessibility features on your cell phone, accessibility features on your computer, which we didn't have those in the early years. But there's so much technology now. Technology just it's hard to keep up with it all. But Norma Jean and John, I don't know what we're going to do if those two leave, because they are like the experts on everything. And so when we want to know what's going on, or, we go and invite them to come out, talk to our students, our professors, or set up an appointment. Sounds like that's what happened with you, where you actually met with Norma Jean so she could see what you were needing, right?
Yes, and the only thing I knew was at Kurzweil, and until just now what you were saying, which is why I want to point out to listeners, I didn't know that they could do like the example of adjusting the flashing of my computer so I could be able to spend more time in each sitting doing my studies. But something that she did was right, and the accommodations I did get, because all of the courses I got A's, A pluses when I completed it, even on final exams.
So it's all about equal access. People, sometimes there are people out there, believe it or not, sometimes even professors, unfortunately, that sometimes say, oh, well, if this person with a disability, is getting this accommodation, we're giving them like a one-up, or we're giving them, no, we're not. It's an equal playing field. It's giving them equal access. It's not, it's kind of like if you start becoming visually, once you turn 40 or after 40, you got to have readers or something, right? Well, that is an accommodation in a way. You have to have glasses. So, I mean, everybody is going to need accommodations at some point for, as we age. But I think that the students have to be able to know to self-identify though, but these professors, they don't always understand, and so we have to continue to keep letting them know, about these different accommodations, and that it's not something that, it's to the professor's benefit to talk to the student and see, how can I help you? For any student, any of your students, you want to be able to help them. You want them to be successful. And I know we have a lot of really good faculty at HCC, so most of them do that. But I think when you get that extra accommodation, whatever that is that you're needing based on your disability, then that's going to help you have even more of a equal access. That's the main thing. You're not trying to do something that is going to compromise anything. It's equal access is all you're really doing for that student. And so those different accommodations are really, really important. But if the student doesn't know, so many times I see students that have gone through classes that didn't self-identify, and then later they find out they needed maybe even our program, and they didn't, and they went on, and then they come, then we find out, or I find out that they didn't do their accommodation letter. They didn't go to ADA or Ability Services. So you don't want to miss out on those accommodations. You want to find out.
Let's get back to how this has to do with right now in this season, where we're talking about Thanksgiving being next week and the troubles of this particular time of the year.
Well, I think so at this time of year, I think that what they need to do is make sure they don't just get their accommodation letter and that's it. Keep in touch with your counselor. Keep in close touch with your counselors, so with the ADA counselors, or any of our counselors. They're there. They can walk in and talk to counselors any day. And I think that you have to know that you have those counselors available. Don't be, keeping all this inside. If there's something that you're struggling with, something that you're stressing about, go and talk to the counselor, because then the counselor will listen. It's confidential, but they will be able to say, oh, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? Or maybe this resource, or maybe that. But I think keeping it all inside and thinking you're alone and not doing anything, or even sometimes letting your professor know you're struggling, the professor, at least let them know. I remember one time when I was in college, and this was years ago, I was ill. I can't even remember. I think I had the mumps or something like that, but it was right around the time, with the exams, but they allowed me to make up my exam. So sometimes you have to let them know if you're struggling with something, but if it's something very confidential or, private, then you definitely want to talk to one of these counselors, or ADA counselors, so that they can see but depending on your disability, you may be able to qualify for an additional accommodation, depending on, what that is. It's so individualized. You can't really say. You really have to go in and talk to the counselor about your specific, disability. And I think sometimes with our students in the VAST Academy, we go above and beyond, and they don't do accommodation letters in VAST. We sort of just, we do a lot more than you would if you were in a regular college credit class. But when they're in high school, there's so much more that they're doing. And I think sometimes the parents and the students think, well, when I come to college, I'm going to get all of that too. And the faculty are not going to adapt the curriculum. You can get certain accommodations, but they're not going to adapt that. But there are supports though. You're not, there's tutoring. We have online and in-person tutoring. Our VAST Academy has that as well. And I think, and so there's those resources. And, but if you don't go and talk to somebody, how are you going to know, what is available to you? And they can connect you to resources in the community. There's also financial. A lot of times
and that's a life lesson too. That's additional part of college, is teaching you the life lesson of you're getting to an age where you have to advocate for yourself and be comfortable with that and acknowledge that and take that step forward, which for some people is difficult.
Mm-hmm. And our faculty are trained to, if they see a student struggling, our faculty should really be saying, and I know we have a lot of really good faculty that do this, that will tell a student, maybe they knew the student had a death in the family, or they knew something just came up. Why don't you go have you thought about talking to Ability Services? Have you thought about talking to one of our counselors? We have some resources. There's a food bank or there's Eagle, I forgot what they call it, the Eagle something store. There's a food scholarship program. There's emergency money. There's emergency money that's available through the HCC Foundation and through Ability Services. I know I've made contributions to that fund for if there's some type of an emergency that's going on. So that's one of the advantages of being at a community college, I think, because it's the community and everybody's reaches out and we're all helping each other. And we have wonderful faculty and student support, services and counselors. And but I know if you're taking classes online, you may not know about all these things because you're not on campus. So they do have on the website links to all of those things. But you want to develop a rapport with your advisor, with your ADA counselor, so that you can talk to them. They're not just there to give you the accommodation letter. Just like if you're with TWC VR, they're not just there to pay for your tuition or give they can help connect you as well. You want to develop a good rapport with them because they can help you.
It's just like networking. It's all about the relationship.
And I think in our VAST program, it's a step up from high school. They're in college now. They still have a little bit more support when they're in VAST. But when they get out of VAST, they're still going to have support, but we're teaching them like those step by step to become more independent, to be able to self-advocate more. In fact, I do have to say real quick, right before this podcast, I didn't get to go, but there was a board meeting yesterday, our board of trustee meeting, and one of our graduates was highlighted, Tiffany Grady, and she is the poster child for self-determination. I mean, she came to our program, gosh, in 2000, I forget the year, I want to say 2008 or something like that. And she only had a second grade level. She came through VAST, graduated from VAST, and she went on and did developmental classes, got a couple certificates in child development. Then those transferred so she could get her associate degree. 2017, she got her associate degree from HCC in child development. She didn't want to go to work in child development right away because her goal now, she wants to be a kindergarten teacher. So she has this goal. It was a long-term goal to be a kindergarten teacher and get her bachelor's. She's not giving up on that goal. And so they featured her and they put the video on our website, or on our VAST website now, as you can watch it. They video her story. And because she is still taking some classes at HCC, she's almost finished. Then she's going to transfer to U of H downtown and start working on her bachelor's. And a lot of these classes are going to transfer. And she hasn't given up. And she started with a second grade level, the cognitive disability. And she spoke at our graduation in 2021. She was the speaker. She serves on our Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, IDD Advisory Council. She serves on our VAST Advisory Council. She volunteers in VAST. I mean, there's so many. She works at HEB. They pay her like over $18 an hour now. I mean, but she's been doing that for a long time because they're flexible with her working schedule, so she can go to school. But she's that example of don't give up. No matter how long it takes, she's not going to give up on her. That is her ultimate goal, to be a kindergarten teacher. And she's become so much more articulate. When you hear her talk, you're like, wow. I listened to the video earlier. I was so impressed with the video. They recorded it at our studio at HCC TV, and they interviewed her, and she was talking, and she's actually presented with me at different conferences too. And I think she's a good role model because it shows these students that are coming up. Look, I was, she was like them. Don't give up. Don't just, I'm only going to stack groceries at a grocery store or something like that. Like some people, or I don't think I can go to college. No, we don't want you to give up on your dream.
Yep.
And sometimes it might take you longer. You might need more supports. But, at HCC is a very nurturing college. And she started off with VAST. She had great professors. She's utilizing tutoring and supports and mentoring and all of that, because I think you need to do that. You don't want to have to do it all by yourself. And take advantage of those resources and supports that are out there. And we have to make sure we're doing a good job of letting the students know what those resources are. Our professors need to tell you that, and your ADA counselors need to tell you as well.
That is really amazing to see somebody go that far.
Yeah, and they did a story on her. They even had her on a billboard a few years ago. They had her picture up on one of those billboards in Houston.
Wow. That's amazing.
So we were excited. And we also just found out we just found out that we're getting the STAR Award from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board STAR Award. It's a state award. So excited about that. VAST is being honored. They said they're going to honor us at the next board meeting in December, but I'm going to Austin along with some other administrators to get this award on December 12th is when we're going to get it. And so we were like, so they recognized, they made that. So we were excited about that because getting the STAR Award, it's not only our team effort in our college, but our students, and looking at all the data of how many of our students have moved on after VAST and completed certificates and even associate degrees, and how how we have worked to help them through those different career pathways and get those supports, and even with this intellectual and developmental disability, they have been able to go on and complete, and that is part of the state goal now, to have more completers. That's the way our college is going to be funded now, not so much by enrollment. There's a new funding formula now where the colleges are going to be funded based on those completion.
Wow.
Students completing these certificates and degrees. And so I'm so excited that we are getting more and more of our students now actually completing associate degrees and certificates and those industry specific careers so they can make more money, more competitive.
It's amazing how the technology has advanced. When I was in college, I mean, we had a lot of deaf students because we were near the North Carolina School for the Deaf. And so we had a lot of deaf education majors. We had a lot of deaf students. And, they didn't have like the Otter and the AI stuff back then that could record what was being said. So we had carbon paper, dual paper. I would take notes and it would make a carbon copy of my notes for some of the deaf students. They'd have 2 or 3 people in the class doing that so that they would catch all of the notes, as well as having an interpreter available. But that was about the only real accommodation that we had. Granted, this was back in the 80s, but
we've come a long way, but there's still ways to go.
Far. Oh yeah. There's definitely still more to be done. But
I do have to mention though, if you need a sign language interpreter, you don't want to wait till like a week before school starts or 2 weeks before school. Someone who needs more comprehensive types of adaptive equipment and things like that, you have to start a month or 2 months early. You have to start early, or you're not going to be able to get those. You have to allow for that.
Yeah, because the interpreters have to be able to learn the vocabulary of those courses. They may not know that automatically.
And it takes time, but we have great, I mean, we've come a long way with all of that, with the interpreters as well. I know in the early years, we had to do a lot of professional development because faculty weren't used to those interpreters and didn't, they want to talk to the interpreter, but you don't talk to the interpreter, you talk to the student, not the interpreter.
Yeah, it's awkward. It's awkward until you get used to it.
Or the instructor would ask the interpreter questions instead of the student, so you have to learn how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about all the time we have today. Jennifer, do you have any announcements coming up? I know you always have your hand in 5 different areas at one time. So what do you have for us today coming up with the holidays coming?
One thing is, I'm going to be, as of today, I've been recruited to be a part of, wait a minute, what was it? Spirit of the Game. And so I'll be a regular public speaker at the Spirit of the Games online events, their public speaking engagements. And one that will have me potentially on every single day as one of the main speakers will be on December 4th through December 8th of 2023 that you can find on LinkedIn by looking up Jackie Zaccoli, Jaque space Z as in zebra, OCCOLI. Jackie Zaccoli is one of the board members who onboarded me to also be over the US and some other regions as the ambassador today. So we will be speaking at those engagements where you can hear more from us beyond just our podcast and on other topics related to wellness. whether it's physical, mental, or various areas of wellness that you want to improve to help better take care of yourself or those that you love. Also, Project Die Hard is still looking for volunteers, as well as trying to get the word out to different veterans in Illinois about the November 28th, 2023 Fob Rush opening date, when they'll have a lot of free food. They'll be socializing. They'll be people of high influence, like politicians and so forth. There are plenty of reasons to go. And it will happen at 189 Haven of Love Drive in Maconda, Illinois, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on November 28th, 2023. If you are interested in that, or you are interested in somehow giving to Project Die Hard, please email Jen at projectdiehard.org. That's JENN at projectdiehard.org. If you're interested in being on the PDH Mission Monday podcast, please email contact at projectdiehard.org. And you will get in touch with Emily and Kurt, who can help get you on the podcast. And that's for all those who want to help veterans in some way or another. It can be time, service, product donation, financial donation, and any other way.
Excellent. Well, as one more thing.
Yes.
Always.
Yes. I want to announce to everybody who is listening that we are looking for different people to fill different positions. The Jaws Coffee Chat team is hiring. We're hiring everything from monetizers to grant writers to fundraising people that can help with fundraisers. And we're even hiring different volunteers for Project Die Hard, like a graphic designer who would be willing to work on a volunteer basis for Project Die Hard, and we'll recognize them and their services on the podcast. As long as they're not afraid of being on the podcast, they'll get actual recognition for what they do as a service to the veterans. We're also hiring other positions, so please be sure to look up Jaws Coffee Chat on LinkedIn for the positions we are posting. And if you have any idea of how you can help, please email us at jensbooksandmore@gmail.com, JENNS books ANDMORE@gmail.com, and let us know what skills and whatever you have to offer that you'd like to be a stakeholder in the company in return for helping out in some way related to your professional background. And over to you, EJ.
All right. Wow. Lots of stuff going on with Jaws Coffee Chat. That's great. Again, thanks to everybody who's been here with us listening today or listening to our rebroadcasts on any of our other channels. We greatly appreciate your support. We will be back with another episode with HCC-VAST program on November 30th after the holiday. So be sure to join us that Thursday at, 3:30 Eastern time. So that would be 2:30 Central. I'm still messed up on the new time changes.
I still have one clock I haven't changed.
I know. It's crazy. All right. So, but yes, definitely join us again. We'll have another lively conversation. I appreciate you being with us, Sue. And as always, Jennifer, you do a great job with the podcast. So take care, and we will see you after Thanksgiving. Have a great break. Take care and have an enjoyable week.